The Matrix, right? That classic scene, Neo choosing the red pill.
Yeah, breaking through the illusion to see reality.
Exactly. It's such a powerful metaphor. And what's really fascinating is how closely it mirrors some ancient Buddhist ideas. And even, even modern science.
It really does. You remember Morpheus saying, "You are a slave, Neo, a prison for your mind." And the only way out, the only way to grasp it is to see it for yourself.
So today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that kind of idea, specifically looking at Robert Wright's book, Why Buddhism Is True.
Right, the science and philosophy of meditation and enlightenment. It's a fantastic exploration.
We're going to unpack how our brains might actually be designed to mislead us.
And dig into the surprising idea of the self, or maybe the lack of one.
And then explore how this ancient wisdom, backed by modern science, might offer a path to, a clearer view, a more liberated way of seeing things.
Yeah, our mission here isn't just theory. We want to look at these as practical insights, stuff that could genuinely change how you perceive yourself in the world.
Think of it as a shortcut, maybe, to getting really well informed about how your own mind actually works.
Okay, so where do we start? The delusion.
Let's start there. The book actually suggests, and this is pretty wild, that the Wachowskis, who directed The Matrix, were partly inspired by Wright's earlier work on evolutionary psychology.
Right. And that brings us to natural selection. The core idea is that our brains, shaped over millennia, aren't primarily built to give us a true picture of reality.
Not their main job, you're saying?
Not their primary function, no. Natural selection is fundamentally about one thing: getting genes into the next generation.
Okay.
So our perceptions, our thoughts, our feelings, they're all geared towards helping our ancestors survive and reproduce.
Even if that means bending the truth, deluding us.
Exactly. If a particular delusion helped our ancestors pass on genes more effectively than seeing the unvarnished truth, then that's what natural selection would favor. Our brains can be, in a very real sense, delusion generators.
You can see this everywhere, can't you? Like chasing after junk food. Or maybe that promotion at work. You get that quick hit of satisfaction, right? But then, poof, it's gone. And you're left wanting more.
That's it perfectly. The book mentions that Rolling Stones line, "I can't get no satisfaction."
Yeah.
And says it basically nails the human condition.
No.
What Buddhism calls dukkha.
Usually translated as suffering or unsatisfactoriness.
Right. And what's really fascinating is why pleasure is designed this way. Natural selection built us to have strong anticipation.
To get us motivated.
Precisely. To make us productive in evolutionary terms. Go get the food, find the mate, whatever. But the pleasure payoff itself, it fades fast.
Leaving you wanting the next hit.
Keeps you on the treadmill. There's that monkey dopamine study.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, initially, the dopamine spike happened when the monkey got the reward, the sweet juice.
Makes sense.
But after learning the routine, the dopamine spike shifted. It started firing when the signal appeared, the light turning on before the juice.
So the pleasure was in the anticipation, not the reward itself.
The brain's reward signal, the dopamine, became linked to the anticipation. It's like a biochemical overpromise. Go do this, it'll be great. And then, maybe not so much. Or not for long.
Wow. Okay, so if our brains are constantly doing this, if they're misleading us, who's running the show? Who is the me that's being misled?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And this leads straight to the Buddhist concept of not self or anatman.
Which says?
It argues that the intuitive feeling you have of a solid, continuous you inside your head, the one thinking thoughts, feeling feelings, making decisions, that kind of central controller, doesn't really exist.
No CEO in the brain.
Basically, yeah. The Buddha used this metaphor of a kingdom, asking if there's a single supreme ruler. His answer was essentially, no. Our conscious mind isn't the king we think it is.
And modern science actually backs this up.
Remarkably so. Look at the split brain experiments. These are patients who had the connection between their brain hemispheres severed, usually to treat severe epilepsy. And you can present information to just one hemisphere. So, say the right hemisphere, which controls the left hand, is shown a picture of a snow scene.
Okay.
The patient, using their left hand, might point to a picture of a shovel. Makes sense, right? Shovel for snow. But the left hemisphere, which controls speech and didn't see the snow scene, only sees the person pointing to a shovel. If you also show the left hemisphere something unrelated, like a chicken claw, and then ask the patient, why did you point to the shovel? The left hemisphere, the speaking part, will just confabulate. It makes up a story.
Like what?
Like, oh, well, you need a shovel to clean out the chicken shed. It connects the shovel to the chicken claw it saw, completely unaware of the snow scene the other half saw.
Whoa, so it just creates a narrative to make sense of the action, even if it's totally wrong.
Exactly. It shows this powerful, almost automatic drive to create a coherent story, to make it seem like there's a unified self in charge making rational decisions, even when that's not what happened at all. Our brain is a master storyteller convincing itself first.
Okay, but why? Why would evolution design us to be so good at, well, fooling ourselves?
From natural selection's point of view, there's a huge advantage to appearing coherent, consistent, and, effective to other people.
Cultural signaling.
Absolutely. If you seem like a reliable, competent agent, others are more likely to cooperate with you, trust you, maybe choose you as a mate.
So it pays to look like you've got it all together.
Right. And this leads to something psychologists call benefactance. It's not just presenting yourself as beneficial and effective.
You actually believe it.
You genuinely believe it. It's self-deception working in tandem with impression management. Think about those studies where 90% of people rate themselves as above average driver.
Or above average in how unbiased they are.
Exactly. It's statistically impossible, but we tend to have these positively skewed self-perceptions. It feels good, and it probably helps us project confidence.
And our memories even play along.
They can, yeah. Memories aren't perfect recordings. They can be subtly edited over time to fit our preferred self-narrative. It's like having an internal PR agent constantly spinning things.
Making it really hard to see our own biases and
It's
delusions.
incredibly hard, especially when that delusion serves a purpose, evolutionarily speaking.
Okay, so if there's no CEO self, no king in the castle, how do we actually make decisions? How does anything get done?
Well, modern psychology, especially evolutionary psychology, talks about a modular mind.
Modular, like different components.
Sort of. Think of it less like fixed apps on a phone and more like a collection of specialized systems or modules that evolve to handle specific tasks, finding food, avoiding predators, attracting mates, caring for offspring, managing social status.
And these modules are all running at once.
Interacting, often unconsciously, and sometimes competing for control. The module that shouts loudest in a given situation, often based on emotional intensity, tends to grab the steering wheel of behavior.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The book mentions how activating a mate acquisition subself, say, by putting a man in a situation where he's thinking about attracting women, can unconsciously change his behavior.
How so?
He might suddenly become more averse to blending into a crowd, want to stand out more, or become more interested in displaying status symbols, more materialistic. And he likely won't even be aware that this shift is happening or why.
Wow, so different selves can take over depending on the context.
That's the idea. It's a fluid interplay. But it's not always harmonious. This internal, free-for-all, can have dark sides.
Like what?
Think about self-protection modules. If they get overly sensitive, they might exaggerate threats. For instance, perceiving people from other groups, other ethnicities, as more dangerous than they really are.
Which could fuel prejudice and conflict.
Exactly. These internal dynamics, these illusions driven by competing modules, can scale up to cause massive societal problems. It really can be a dog-eat-dog world inside your head, as Wright puts it.
This is sounding, kind of bleak. If our minds are just these bundles of competing, often diluted modules, is there any way out? Any hope for clarity?
There is. And that's where the second part of the book's argument comes in the path offered by practices like mindfulness meditation.
Okay.
And what's interesting is the author, Robert Wright, he's very upfront about not being a naturally gifted meditator. He calls himself closer to Bobby Knight than the Dalai Lama.
The famously fiery basketball coach.
Right. But he argues this actually makes him a good test case, an exemplary laboratory rat, because he experiences the struggle intensely.
The struggle to quiet the mind.
Exactly. The constant mind wandering, the distractions, the frustration. But here's the key insight. Even noticing that mind wandering, that's progress.
Just seeing it happen.
Yes. That background chatter, what psychologists sometimes call the default mode network, is usually running the show unconsciously. When you sit down to meditate and you notice your mind flitting from thought to thought.
You're stepping outside of it, just for a second.
Precisely. You're observing the mechanism. You're having a moment of meta-awareness. You're breaking free, however briefly, from just being blindly led around by your thoughts. That noticing is the practice, especially at the beginning.
Okay. So it's not about achieving perfect silence immediately.
Not at all. It leads to this idea, this gentle art of not feeding the urge.
What does that mean?
Mindfulness isn't about wrestling your thoughts or feelings into submission. It's about observing them without judgment and, crucially, without acting on every impulse they generate.
Like that stray cat analogy in the book.
Exactly. If you keep feeding a stray cat, it'll keep coming back. If you stop feeding it, eventually it stops showing up at your door.
So applying that to, say, an addiction or just a distraction.
Right. Whether it's a craving for a cigarette, the urge to check your phone instead of working, or even intense emotions like anger or hatred, the practice is to observe the feeling as a feeling.
Notice the physical sensations, the thoughts that arise with it.
Without immediately reacting, without feeding the module that generated that urge by giving it the payoff it wants. Whether that payoff is nicotine, distraction, or the temporary satisfaction of lashing out.
And by not reinforcing it.
You gradually weaken its grip. It's paradoxical, isn't it? You gain control not by fighting the impulse, but by calmly, mindfully observing it. You decouple the feeling from the action.
That's a powerful idea. It goes beyond just managing urges, though, right? Mindfulness can lead to deeper shifts in perception.
Absolutely. It can lead towards perceiving what Buddhism calls emptiness, or shunyata.
Emptiness, that sounds maybe a bit nihilistic.
It can sound that way, but that's not really the meaning here. It's not saying things don't exist. It's saying they lack inherent fixed essence. Meaning the qualities we project onto things, the goodness, the badness, the meaning, the scariness, aren't intrinsic to the things themselves. They're stories, interpretations, labels that our minds add.
Okay, like the buzzsaw example.
Yeah, that's a great illustration. Wright describes hearing this annoying buzzsaw sound during meditation. Initially, it's grating, right? Negative feeling. But by mindfully observing the raw sound itself, letting go of the negative story, this is annoying, it's ruining my peace, he found he could perceive it differently, almost like music, just pure sound waves.
The sound didn't change, but his relationship to it did.
Exactly. The sound itself is passive. Our minds make it pleasant or unpleasant by adding this layer of judgment, this feeling tone, this perceived essence.
And this applies to everything. People too.
That's the radical claim. Our brains are constantly tagging things and people with positive or negative valence, good, bad, like, dislike. These feelings infuse our perception, making it seem like that goodness or badness is in the person or object.
Like that Harvard study showing how quickly we judge someone's whole character based on one action.
Right, we create an essence for them, good person, bad person, often based on very limited, maybe misleading information. Mindfulness helps us see through those automatic tags.
Like Wright's experience with his bitter enemy, Larry.
Yeah, he describes realizing through meditation that the intense negative feeling, the essence of Larryness he perceived, wasn't Larry himself. It was his own mind's reaction.
And seeing Larry instead as, what was it, an insecure person?
Something like that, yeah. Seeing the underlying vulnerability or the shared human condition rather than just the projected bad vibe aura. That shift allowed for compassion instead of animosity. It's about deconstructing those ingrained judgments.
So not self isn't just about thoughts thinking themselves inside my head.
Right. It also applies to the exterior, questioning the very boundary between you and the rest of the world.
How does that work?
Wright recounts this powerful meditation experience where he felt the tingling sensation in his foot.
Okay.
And realized, in that moment, it felt no more intrinsically part of him than the sound of a bird singing outside his window.
The usual boundary dissolved.
For a moment, yes. That hard line we instinctively draw, everything inside my skin is me, everything outside is not me, started to seem arbitrary, a mental construct.
That sounds profound.
Yeah.
And maybe a bit disorienting.
It can be. There's that quote from the adept meditator Gary Weber.
What did he say?
The bad news is that you don't exist. The good news is that you're everything.
Huh. That's a paradox.
It is. But it suggests that letting go of this tightly constructed, bounded sense of self can open up a feeling of, well, deep connection, unity.
And the implications of that are huge, right? If you genuinely experience others as connected to you, not truly separate.
Why would you harm them? It undermines the very logic of selfishness that natural selection seems to favor. It's a rebellion against that programming that screams, I am special, my interests come first.
The book links this to Tana as well, the craving and aversion.
Yes, Tana is seen as deeply intertwined with the sense of a separate self. My desire for something pleasant or my aversion to something unpleasant both constantly reinforce the idea of me here needing something from an out there.
So overcoming that craving aversion cycle is part of experiencing not self.
They go hand in hand. As the sense of a fixed, separate self dissolves, the intensity of clinging and pushing away tends to diminish too.
This all seems to be pointing towards enlightenment. Nirvana. What does that actually mean in this context?
Well, it's often associated with bliss, and that can be part of it, but nirvana is described as something much deeper.
More than just feeling good.
Much more. It's talked about as a state of perfect happiness, complete peace, complete inner freedom, and full awakening and understanding. It's liberation.
Liberation from suffering.
From suffering in this life, yes.
Yeah.
Not just about future rebirths in traditional Buddhism, but about finding freedom from dukkha, that background hum of unsatisfactoriness right here and now.
And the book frames this as a rebellion.
Yeah, rebellion against our creator, not a deity, but natural selection itself.
The robot overlords that programmed our delusions.
Exactly. Enlightenment, in this view, is about waking up from the matrix imposed by our evolutionary history. It's liberating ourselves from values that were useful for gene proliferation, but might not serve our actual well-being or lead to a true understanding of reality.
So it's moving beyond the purely self-interested, gene-focused perspective.
Towards something more objective. Wright calls it striving for a view from nowhere, a perspective where your own welfare isn't automatically privileged over anyone else's, a perspective aligned with moral truth, you could say.
There's another paradox here, isn't there? Doesn't meditation sometimes lead to a kind of detachment, a distance from feelings?
It can, yes.
Why?
A certain sober clarity. But strangely, this often leads to what Wright calls a re-enchantment of the world.
Enchantment? How?
He gives this beautiful example of observing his own feeling of melancholy during a winter twilight.
Okay.
As he mindfully observed it, the feeling itself kind of neutralized. It lost its sting. And as that happened, the actual scene, the twilight, the landscape, suddenly seemed stunningly beautiful, filled with awe.
So by detaching from the personal emotional reaction,
the inherent beauty of the world shone through more clearly. It suggests that a mind less caught up in the constant self-centered chatter, the distorting enterprise of operating a self, can actually experience more beauty, more joy, more wonder.
that's a lovely thought. But let's be realistic. Wright himself says he doesn't expect full enlightenment anytime soon. So what does this mean for the rest of us, practically?
He argues that enlightenment isn't necessarily this binary all-or-nothing state way off in the distance. It's better understood as a process.
A gradual liberation.
Exactly, where consistent practice, even imperfect practice, leads to moments of insight, small moments of truth that accumulate over time.
And these moments can be small things.
They can be as simple as truly hearing the different hums your refrigerator makes, noticing sensory details without the usual layer of judgment. Or they can be more profound.
Like the Larry example. Seeing someone annoying with compassion?
Right. Breaking down that automatic essence of jerk perception and achieving a clearer, more morally insightful view. Each moment like that is a small victory, a tiny bit of liberation.
And the book suggests this metacognitive revolution, just understanding how our minds work and learning to observe them.
Isn't just for personal peace, it might be crucial for tackling bigger problems.
Like tribalism, conflict.
Yeah. If we can become more aware of the unconscious biases and delusions that fuel group conflict, maybe we stand a better chance of overcoming them, saving the world from our own minds, in a way.
It all comes together in a really striking way at the end.
It does. Buddhism makes this incredible claim. The path to reducing your own suffering, achieving your own well-being.
Is the same path as seeing reality more clearly, seeing metaphysical truth.
And it's the same path as acting more morally. These three things, happiness, truth, and goodness, aren't separate goals you have to trade off. They converge. The happiness you gain isn't just more happiness, it's a different kind of happiness. One based on the clarity, on seeing things as they are, rather than on delusion.
So wrapping this up,
Yeah.
what's the final takeaway? If our brains are built to fool us, if the self is a kind of illusion, what do we do with that information Monday morning?
Well, maybe the most profound deep dive you can ever take is into the workings of your own consciousness.
Realizing that the search for personal happiness, for a true view of the world, and even for being a better person,
They're all tangled up together. It's one journey.
it really comes down to a choice, doesn't it? Similar to Neo's choice.
Yeah. Do you stay plugged into the default programming, the one natural selection handed down? Or do you start your own red pill journey?
Trying to wake up, even just a little bit, one moment of truth at a time.
Exactly. Seeing the matrix for what it is from the inside out.